All right. Another review video from me. Bowling with Corpses and Other Strange Tales from Lands Unknown by Mike Mignola with his longtime coloring collaborator Dave Stewart. This just came out, I think, last month. It's a hardback, good quality. It's not sewn or glued in, it's actually sewn, so it's a nice quality book. It's a brand new IP, fresh start for Mike Mignola. No nostalgia to sell it on, no big IP. It's just his reputation as a master storyteller, and that's all he's got to go on, and it works. It's a fantastic book. It's a collection of short stories. First one is based on a Italian folk tale. All the stories in here are, I suppose, technically fantasy, but they're more like fairy tales, folklore, 1001 Arabian Nights kind of stories. The stories all have a touch of horror to them, there's ghosts and vampires. But I don't know, I honestly, I hesitate to call it fantasy just because fantasy nowadays is so derivative. It's like a copy of a copy of a copy, It's like, oh, I was inspired by a video game that was inspired by a book that was inspired by Lord of the Rings and things that you've seen 100 times before. But this is not one of those. It's got its own thing going on that's really more based on, like I said before, fairy tales, folk tales, and just creepy stories. He touched on that a little bit with his Hellboy books, but this really delves into it. Another interesting thing I thought about this book is he is not afraid of just doing huge lore dumps. Like the second chapter or story of the book is like 6 pages of just talking about the origins of the world. And like there's nothing really going on except for characters talking at you. But he still makes it work, and it's still compelling, and it's still interesting to read. It's not just exposition that you kind of skim over and don't really care about. I suppose it's just because his fantastic design and style, the visuals really grip you. But it just works, even though it's kind of a no-no. Then, let's see, next one is kind of a cautionary tale. Got a lot of influence from 1001 Arabian Nights, it feels like. He's got another creepy cautionary tale. Somebody gets a little greedy, wanting magical powers, and pays the price. It's a common theme that he delves into. We'll just keep on going through the book here. I don't want to spoil everything. The interesting thing about his storytelling style, he's so good at laying out a panel and laying out a picture, but he's also really, really good at, the sequentials that are in the story and how the panels progress. like here, you don't even see this very often in comic books, but like that panel, that's not what happens next, you know. It's like a flavor panel, or over here, you know. This is not a sequence of events. These are just, it's like the camera's panning around, and this is just flavor that you're soaking in for the scene. And then, you know, he'll jump to the next part of the story. This next story, The Old Soldier and the King, is kind of a gnome. Well, I guess he calls them kobolds in this one, but that was a good one. Keep going. This one here, this story is, I think this is probably going to be one of his continuing characters as he does more stories from this universe. Una and the Devil. And the devil in this case, I don't think it's literally the devil. I think it's a vampire. And she signs a contract with him to go kill a witch hunter, but then, like, the Queen of the Cats stops her because this witch hunter is just killing witches who do harm, which I thought was an interesting twist on it. Normally, you know, you would see it's like, oh, the witch hunter's evil and all the witches are good, but that's not the case here. And I thought that was a refreshing twist on the story. But she is changed by the end of the story, and I think we'll see continuing tales from this character. And then at the end here, he does yet another lore dump, talking about all the different worlds in there, and he's just jumping around from setting to setting, but it's still just the colors and like the design on the landscapes and the buildings is just fantastic. So even though it's just another world building chapter, he still makes it work. He's got these weird elephant creatures. And then finally, I guess this is the map of the world. But that's where it ends. He has an afterword to kind of explain some things. Interestingly, this kind of ties into his Hellboy universe a little bit, even though I don't think you'll ever see any Hellboy characters in this book or this series, but he kind of explains it in the afterword. And then, like most of his collections, he's got sketches and design, which are always cool to look at. But all in all, this is a great book. I recommend picking it up. It's fantasy, but even if you don't like fantasy, you will probably like it. And Mike Mignola once again proves he's still got it. You know, a lot of people don't like his, I say newer art style, but I think he's been drawing in this simplified, you know, shapes and shadows look for like 15 years or so now. But, you know, I honestly, I prefer some of his earlier stuff, you know, from the 90s compared to how he draws now, but this still works, you know. It's so abstract, but the design is so strong. And all you can really latch on to is the storytelling. And it's just great book. See if you can track it down and give it a read.